Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi and our guest today is Yobo Rutin. Yobo, welcome to the Elephant.
Thank you very much.
Yobo is an expert on governance, particularly around pastoralism. And he's done a lot of work on pastoralism over the last few years, almost over a decade now. So Yobo, I wanted to start from, a lot of the time in the media narrative around Pokot, they are always painted as warlike, warrior-like. Where do you think this comes from? Because they're always seen as people who are not up to anything good.
Thank you so much. This is an area that I've always been interested in. I've been able to make one or two commentaries on the subject, on the matter, at least in the last 6 months. And I think I'm excited to really give my views about this. I think the very reason why the Pokot, for example, are portrayed as warlike and at the same time up to no good is there are about two reasons for that. One is that there have been some repetitive actually engagement by the Pokot themselves in what we call cattle raiding and cattle rustling. There's a slight difference there. But at the same time, there's also the challenge of the media unto itself not taking its responsibility strongly and in the best way possible. What is the media doing? The media is taking what one would obviously call an easy route, escaping to deal with what it might think to be a seemingly irresolvable issue. There are very fundamental issues as to why the Pokot, for example, would engage in cattle rustling, and not just the Pokot themselves. This is quite as much other communities around the Pokot, for example, all pastoralists basically when they are faced by issues to do with the drought. And these are reasons that the media unto themselves do not want to engage. Probably sometimes the media would use stereotypes, misrepresent the truth, sometimes perhaps inadvertently, at times knowing exactly what they're doing, perhaps because they are beholden to certain centers of power, or because there's a reason as to why, maybe on the basis of the ownership of the media stations or the press or mobile telephony networks, that they do not reflect the interests of some of these communities. And these are some of the reasons that are fundamental to this. Let me give you a question.
Thank you, Yobo. Yeah. And, the media plays a significant role. I mean, you're right in saying that, most pastoralist communities, at least in Kenya, they are portrayed as people who sometimes not interested in peace. I mean, a lot of it is also the way it's covered and the time it's covered. I mean, there is life outside cattle rustling and raiding. This happens, but it's not the only thing that happens in these communities. But I wanted to, drill in a little bit and ask, this media portrayal of this community, particularly Pokot, how then does it impact government policies in the way the government responds to any problems or issues that affects the community?
Like I said before, if you insist on repetitive stereotyping of a community, presenting narratives that are fundamentally flawed or are not even productive in the long term, if you engage in calling on the Pokot, for example, to ensure that they remain peaceful without addressing the fundamental issues that really affect their livelihoods, then you're probably saying that people should have an uncritical relationship with the powers that be that ought to sort some of the problems that the communities are having. In this case, you are assisting the responsibility holders to avoid the most important interventions that they should make to ensure that cattle rustling, for example, or the challenges that pastoralists are facing are resolved. And most of the time, if you keep going back on the same narratives without really reflecting even reflecting about the concepts that have been there about cattle riding, reflecting why shouldn't it change, then you're really like taking a conservative approach where you're saying nothing really changes. And there are two ways of doing this. First, as a media organization, or whether you're the press or whatever, you keep ensuring that the people who are supposed to call for accountability are incapable of doing that, because the dominant narrative that has been sold already makes people feel that, okay, we've been blamed and we are wrong and we don't have rights. There's no justice. So it shapes government policy by the mere fact that some of the narratives circulated around then makes the government less accountable. The government taking decisions on issues to do with disarmament uncritically, even when the community representatives themselves say, hey, this is not productive in the long run. Government, for example, ensures that pastoralist lands where they're meant to get water, pasture, and the security of their livestock is taken for mega projects without due compensation protocols. And so the media does this either to legitimize any policies that do not reflect the interests of the communities themselves. And probably what the media does best is to use, I think the biggest issue is to rubber stamp what the government is doing one way or another. First, by not saying, hey, this intractable problem has been going on for quite a long while. Why don't we have a refocus of our editorial policies, our doctrinal understanding, our strategies on how to cover this issue? So what the media goes on to do is to take a war journalism instead of a peace journalism kind of approach, where in a war journalism, you only tell us who's done what, yeah? Where did it happen, and how many casualties were there. So it becomes a narrative of here and now, but it's nothing that can really benefit the society in a productive way. As opposed to a situation where you take a peace advocacy as a media organization and say, hey, let's look at the fundamental issues that are really driving these conflicts. The real issues are, for example, not really the Pokot. I would tell you, one of it is social marginalization, insecurity, illegal arms, land tenure security, mega projects, lack of definition of lack of voice on the part of the people. And these issues are not really about Pokots. They are everywhere, whether you go to Karamoja and etc. So the moment you do that, as a media organization, by presenting, simplifying, demonizing a single community in an area, then you are telling the government you can shuck your responsibility and get away with it.
Absolutely. And that now takes me to, because you said, the problem, not just for the Pokots, but for most pastoralists, when it comes to conflict, it is multidimensional. Do you want to speak to it a bit, unpack some of the things that you said, social marginalization, political marginalization, land tenure system, not to get too much into the weeds, but just providing, a very nuanced understanding of some of these issues. For instance, how does social marginalization lead to cattle rustling and raiding?
Yeah, I think when you have a situation where members of a given community, a pastoralist community, does not have the capacity to organize itself, to have a voice, to ensure that they have a better representation, you'd probably say that then they do not even have the capacity to gain services like education that would give them alternative livelihoods, if that's what people want, really. But in terms of social marginalization, then that means there's a lot of services that they may require, health, education, they cannot really get it. And you know the history of the kind of country we are talking about, Kenya. Most of these marginal communities really portray the highest poverty rates ever. And so as a reaction then, what happens is that this contributes to their sense of not being supported. When you come to land tenure rights, we've had a system where there's no parity between private land and community land in terms of recognition. So whenever you want to have a mega project, maybe in the extractive industries, let's say oil is found somewhere or gas, it's rather simple to get it in what perhaps the stereotype indicates to be the wasteland. So perennially, you'd have these communities fighting over border issues. You'd find that the implementation, even when there's constitutional recognition for community land, up to now, we don't have a proper idea on, for example, what is the border between Pokot and Marakwet and, and Turkana, for example. These are issues that, when you have some kind of journalism that doesn't dig into some of these issues, then, and which focuses on the opinion of the elites rather than the ordinary person on the ground, where you interview the NGO director, the chief, any kind of report that you get, for example, it's because the Minister for Internal Security has gone down there, rather than asking the people really, what is going on here? They will tell you.
Yes, that is brilliant, Yobo. I want to end on a note that how can we resolve this issue? Because generally, when I look at the pastoralist areas or regions or counties, two things stand out. One is drought and the other one is conflict. And sometimes they all come together and it even makes it very difficult. So in terms of cattle rustling, some of the methods that I see are very down, top down, like disarmament and demobilization. What do you think? Why has this failed in your opinion?
I think for quite a long time, I think all our interventions have not really understood the need to really deal with the very critical issues. One is, if you recognize pastoralism as a survival livelihood for pastoralists, where mobility is key and where, let's say, hard dispersal is important, and social networking is also important for pastoralists to survive, then you'd prioritize questions of mobility. Then you don't tell people you're demobilizing them. So if you demobilize a Pokot, and the only pasture that is there is in Takwel Gorge, hydroelectric or National Game Reserve, which you acquired by force, then ensure that then you provide them with water, and I'm ranking them, water, pasture, security of their livestock, yeah. And then also you probably want to cease looking at pastoralism from only an economic point of view. There are social, cultural issues, pride, heritage, and all that, which often we don't want to take into recognition. The challenge again is that even if when you disarm the Pokot and you're not disarming the Turkana or the Karamoja, the next day the Pokot are attacked and you come back and report as a media person, 100 dead. You're simply telling us that, I don't understand it all. So this don't work. The other thing also is that you tend to have elite decisions, outsider opinions. The interaction between the community and the elite, the state, and the stakeholders who are probably elite has never been of any mutual beneficiality to any of them. For what reason? We've failed for quite a long time to develop a multi-stakeholder engagement on the simple question of natural resource management. You cannot order people to do one thing or a section of people. So instead of talking to the ordinary people, we've always parachuted our own solutions onto them. And this renders everything less productive. I'll give you an example. If today you just walk into some county in, let's say, in Central Province or in Central Kenya, and told people now from today you're seizing coffee without a very good reason. I do suppose that a conversation may not last even 2 minutes, but it's very easy to have it in what we probably think is wastelands, you know, or nobody's land. And these are the very questions that, the question of inclusivity of the ordinary voice, the people who are practically undergoing some of these challenges, our own interest really in generating institutional relationships with the communities that are practical and will withstand all the challenges that we've always been facing is important. A regional dimension to this is equally important. There are times when, of course, the small arms and light weapons must be rounded up. I mean, in Uganda has done quite a wonderful job at some point around this, but you could see without a regional perspective to it, it doesn't work. When Southern Sudan is facing a major problem with a given community, and the Toposa attack the Turkana, I mean, the Turkana, just because our strategy doesn't have a multi-stakeholder strategy to it. And I think these are some of the just examples to indicate to you that if we really wanted to deal with cattle rustling, then we had better think again.
No, thank you so much, Yobo. That is really important because we need this level of multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder analysis that looks at the nuances of what is going on, you know, the history, the regional dynamic. It's not just coming in and saying to one group, drop down all your arms and they remain vulnerable. We will have this conversation again, Yobo, but thank you so much for taking your time. And I hope we'll have another time to have this and many other conversations affecting pastoralism in the North and the Northwest.
You're welcome, always.